Imagine standing alone on a long stretch of coastline. Miles out, right where the water meets the sky, massive shapes break the horizon. Through the thick sea mist, the hazy silhouettes look unmistakable. An invading armada is heading straight for your shore. For an isolated observer on the beach, that vague shape triggers a spike in heart rate. The physical distance makes gathering concrete details impossible, leaving the mind to deal entirely with a sudden, overwhelming sense of impending doom. That ancient scenario from the shoreline mirrors how our modern brains react to undefined threats today. When a sweeping life change or a distant deadline first appears on our personal horizon, the lack of clarity instantly triggers our survival instincts. This animation illustrates a specific cognitive mechanism at play. The human brain completely rejects a data vacuum. When facing an uncertain future, the mind rapidly fills that empty data gap with volatile projections. Without hard facts, these projections split toward extreme poles. We anticipate a catastrophic threat or a miraculous intervention. Reality rarely factors into the initial calculation. Greek philosophers and storytellers recognized this exact blind spot thousands of years ago. Fables attributed to Aesop explored how humans fail to evaluate reality objectively when emotions take over. In the 17th century, a French writer named Jean de La Fontaine, a poet famous for adapting those classical myths into modern fables, explicitly codified this psychological quirk into the stories we are dissecting today. His writing isolates a harsh truth about human perception. Physical and psychological distance acts as the primary catalyst for a distorted reality. The further away an object is, the less we see it for what it actually is. Let's return to the beach. As the mysterious object drifts closer to the sand, the atmospheric haze clears. The observer realizes it is not a massive armada at all. It appears to be a single, heavy merchant ship riding the ocean swells. The physical proximity forces the observer's internal narrative to scale down proportionally. The grand expectation of a sprawling fleet shrinks to fit the new, slightly clearer data point. Then, the object finally hits the shallow water. Silt and foam wash away, revealing the undeniable final state. There is no warship. There is no merchant vessel. The tide has delivered nothing but rotting driftwood and mundane sticks. We can classify this as a failure of the lens of expectation. This is a cognitive bias where we desperately hope for a grand, structured reality to emerge from the unknown, only to be handed completely useless debris. We often treat optimism as a virtue, yet positive magnification is as dangerous as absolute panic. When you project immense value on something you haven't actually inspected, you severely miscalculate the actual resources you have at your disposal. La Fontaine's text also flips this concept to examine the opposite extreme, how we process living, dynamic threats. To do this, he uses the arrival of a camel. When people encounter an unknown, strange-looking entity from a massive distance, they enter the first behavioral stage. The bizarre silhouette triggers complete terror and a raw biological instinct for immediate flight. As the creature slowly closes the gap, the observers enter the second, mid-range stage. They stop running, they turn around and transition into a state of cautious, highly defensive observation, watching the animal's movements. Then comes the final proximity stage. The creature walks right up to them. Upon close inspection, the observers immediately realize the animal is entirely docile. The human reaction shifts entirely. Instead of fleeing, a person simply steps forward, slips a heavy rope around the creature's neck, and harnesses it for daily labor. This establishes a clear rule of perception. Proximity systematically strips away the monstrous facade. By simply closing the distance, a paralyzing, unknown threat is transformed into a highly manageable utility. This split-screen diagram synthesizes both the floating sticks and the camel into a single concept, the distance illusion. On both sides, you see tiny or docile objects casting massive, terrifying shadows. As the marker moves closer, those shadows shrink down to reality. Now look at this line graph charting our emotional response. It plots anxiety and expectation inversely against our proximity to a subject. When physical distance is high, our imagination compensates for the lack of hard data by spiking our emotions. As distance drops to zero, our anxiety crashes right down to a flat baseline. Modern society complicates this by constantly forcing us to stare at artificial horizons. We spend hours analyzing distant economic forecasts or scrolling through abstract global news headlines that we cannot touch or verify. Because we are essentially trapped looking at threats that remain miles out at sea, our brains never get the relief of proximity. This unavoidable, long-distance viewing creates a chronic societal state of delusion and anxiety. Mastering objective reality requires a disciplined refusal to engage emotionally with blurred horizons. If the data is far away, the emotional response must be muted. You can build a cognitive toolkit to handle this. Start treating every new personal anxiety, every distant rumor, and every grand expectation as an unidentified object still bobbing far out at sea. Deliberately delay your reactions. Deny yourself the rush of premature celebration, and refuse to entertain unnecessary panic. Wait until the object washes up and the granular details are fully visible. True clarity and control only exist at the shoreline. That is the exact point where the illusions fade, the shadows shrink, and the unknown finally becomes an undeniable, actionable reality.